Hello. Today we're talking about big data, more specifically the use of big data in humanitarian development. My name is Matthew Ng, and my partner is Peter Dolanjski, and the project sponsor of this initiative is Dr. Peter Carr. Why are we here? The problem we're here to talk about is that NGOs are not reaching their full potential in three different areas. First is fundraising. Second is direction of aid and investment. And the third is quantifiable decision making. How do we use data to back up the decisions we make? How do we fix the problem? Well, we use big data to transform the nature of humanitarian development. Before we get into big data, I'd first like to introduce the team. On the left-hand side, you'll see Dr. Peter Carr from the University of Waterloo. He's a professor who is incredibly passionate about using technology to help our society. In the middle, you'll see Peter Dolanjski. He's a master's student at the University of Waterloo, and Peter is also working full-time at Mozilla leading product management. On the right-hand side is myself. I work at Electronic Arts, or more specifically EA Sports. I'm a project manager at that company. What is big data? Well, big data is the aggregation of data sets in various forms which can then be analyzed and used to inform decision making, process and policy creation, and more. Why now? There are huge benefits of big data. Let's get into that. The four major big benefits of big data are, the first one is indirect dialogue with the customer. By better understanding how a customer behaves, we can treat customers as unique individuals. Now, companies will have strived to have this for many years, but companies and organizations just don't have the resources to really go out there and get to know every customer. Now, with big data, that is now possible, and you can cater a message or an experience for each individual customer or stakeholder that you interface with. The third point you see here is predict risk ahead of time. One example I usually like to use is Google is able to predict risk for the world. For example, they're able to know what region or city a disease or a cold or flu is spreading more quickly by analyzing search queries from individuals in that city. If more people are searching about flu symptoms, they can predict that the flu is spreading in that city at that time. The fourth point is using more data, big data, to benchmark your organization's performance can help accelerate and motivate how your organization runs. How does big data work? Well, to simplify in 3 steps. The first step is you gather business needs and requirements from stakeholders. This is incredibly important because a lot of organizations make the mistake of having the IT department put together specifications on big data implementation without really understanding the business. It's important to talk to your stakeholders first, gather requirements, and then engage your IT department for step 2, where you're collecting high variety, volume, and velocity of data. What that means for variety is as many data sources as you possibly can, whether it's metrics from telephone calls, website traffic, website analytics, social media such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Collect as much as you can, which is volume. And the velocity of data is important because you want to be able to get this data as quickly as possible so your decisions can be made in real time. Step 3, analysis of raw data collected to, again, meet the business needs that you talk about in step 1. The research approach we went with were mostly online resources in regards to big data and humanitarian development. We've read a lot of academic papers, news articles, NGO reports, and blogs But last but not least, we also wrote this report and put together the presentation based on our experience at our current companies. We've also wanted to conduct an interview with someone from an NGO who's familiar with big data, and that's currently in progress right now. The next section of our presentation, we dive more into how big data can benefit NGOs. And so let me please introduce Peter Dolanjski, my partner.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to talk about how NGOs are using big data today, or how they could be using as part of their activities. One of those areas is fundraising. The ability for NGOs to fundraise is paramount to the successful prosecution of their mission. And by leveraging data about trends and interests as derived from social media posts, and there's various pieces of software for this, NGOs can effectively target valuable donors through online ad campaigns. And then once potential donors actually arrive on the NGO website or mobile application, the e-commerce principles of conversion funnel optimization can be used to optimize how many of those individuals actually make a donation. In this way, it's actually similar to something like Amazon, which constantly updates their website, their designs to make sure that they have maximum throughput with people making purchases. And this relates to big data because it is the analytics behind the traffic to these websites that enables these sort of optimizations. Another area is the direction of aid and investments. And until recently, data to help choose how aid and investments would be directed for NGOs was based on traditional methods of data capture, such as surveys. The problem is that this data would be very time consuming to capture, and much could change by the time it was possible to actually act on that data. Simply put, that data lacked volume, variety, and velocity. Big data enables social and economic conditions to be understood in near real time. And as such, aid and investments could be directed to where they are most impactful. Here's two quick examples of this. By monitoring social network status updates, it's actually possible to track the displacement of people in natural disasters, such as in Haiti's recent earthquake, and thereby determine where to send food and temporary housing to have the most impact. And also by doing the same thing for keywords related to something like Ebola on Twitter or other social networks, is actually possible to direct medical and quarantine teams to the forefront of this disease spread and help stop that disease before it gets too far. Another area where NGOs could benefit drastically from big data is in decision making. And big data enables decisions to be made quickly based on quantifiable evidence. And it's based on what's actually happening on the ground in near real time. Let's go over a few examples. So in order for a farmer to maximize their revenue, they need to take into consideration a number of factors. The type of soil they have, the weather patterns for their particular area, the commodity prices of various crops, the price of seeds, and more. But it's impossible for a farmer in, for example, a given African nation to gather all of these inputs. And the historical data may be out of date. As an example, Vital Signs is one organization that is making it possible for a farmer to get very specific recommendations about which crops to plant based on the data that is gathered in an automated fashion right on their smartphones. So for their particular plot of land, they can decide how to maximize their revenue. Another area is water sources and quality. WaterPoint Data Exchange is an organization who has aggregated disparate sets of data about water sources and quality and made it available for NGOs to use as they see fit to enable decision making. And one last example here is understanding human dynamics. By analyzing mobile phone data in Kenya, researchers were able to understand how people moved from about the city, from slums to other areas, such that information would prove invaluable in setting up health clinics, job assistance centers, schools, and more. The problem is there are a lot of barriers to adoption. And these are barriers that NGOs would need to face in order to successfully use big data to their benefit. And one of these barriers is the availability of open data sets. Today, much of the data that would be incredibly useful in decision making, it's trapped. It's buried in data silos. Some of this is due to commercial interest and some due to lack of collaboration between NGOs. For example, Google, Qualcomm, and other corporate corporations maintain proprietary systems of location-based service data, such as GPS information correlated with cell towers, correlated with traffic conditions, and all these other things. This data would prove invaluable to humanitarian development endeavors. And the lack of open data, it's making it very difficult and costly for NGOs to actually take on big data projects alone because they would need to build these systems to actually benefit from the same things that companies like Google already have access to. And there's a problem of complexity. So even when data sets are available, they're often in a non-standardized format, which means it's very difficult to aggregate data together and derive useful insights from it. For example, if water quality is measured in different countries using different systems with very different measured values, the aggregation of that data is not meaningful. Further, the evidence shows that NGOs, like businesses, do not actually have the people with the specialty skill sets required to sift through data and build algorithms to make sense of it. Most, for example, are not employing data scientists today. And even in the private sector, McKinsey actually estimates that by 2018, the US will face a shortage of workers, about 150 to 190,000 people with deep data analytics skills that could actually make sense of big data to make effective decisions. Using big data can introduce serious risks that also need to be understood and evaluated. For example, if an NGO existed to protect endangered species and they were to share that the data sets about the location of these endangered species for the benefit of general conservation, poachers could equally use that data to negative effect. And lastly, because much of the useful data for NGOs is actually derived from the general population, there are significant privacy issues that need to be understood and mitigated. Here's an example. Tracking mobile devices is often done with personally identifiable information, associating actual smartphone or mobile phone hardware to a person. And if that person happens to be near a crime when it occurs, that information in the wrong hands could be used to wrongfully tie an individual to that crime. So how can NGOs actually get started to have success with big data? Well, there was a recent survey done by the Wikibon open source community that showed that there's a significant misalignment between companies' expectations versus the reality of return on investment for big data projects. In fact, most projects for big data were returning 55 cents on the dollar in this survey. And the research from Gartner also found that 41% of companies who fund big data projects do so without knowing what their return will be. The point here is that you can't just jump right into a big data project without understanding the desired outcomes. So to get started, NGOs should narrow in on the desired outcomes, which necessitate the use of big data to start with. And implementation should be done in an agile fashion, avoiding long, monolithic projects. The value should be proven along the way. To avoid some of the complexities of data centers and hiring new staff, NGOs could also make use of cloud services and train their existing employees. Further, NGOs could leverage the strong interest in big data by releasing their data to scientists to derive valuable insights at either no or significantly reduced cost. And there's a number of examples where this has been done to great effect. Let me talk briefly about partnership and collaboration as well. The private sector is far ahead of NGOs in leveraging big data and building capable tools and technologies. It turns out that the same technologies can be used in support of actual humanitarian development projects. So for example, you have Facebook with their Internet.org initiative who have built a satellite image visualization system to identify regions which had certain population densities but were untouched by internet connectivity. Their purpose was to employ drones, satellites, and lasers to actually beam internet down to base stations to bring internet to more people. However, the same technology can actually be used for socioeconomic information or natural disaster response. So as such, it's actually highly recommended that NGOs seek private sector partnerships to leverage their expertise and capital investments, as well as to leapfrog the barriers to adoption, such as investment and lack of available data sets. Further, because many NGOs have common needs, it would be prudent for NGOs to actually seek partnership and consortium when goals are shared for the purposes of pooling resources and data sets. thereby enabling economies of scale to actually kick in. A good example of this is the WaterPoint data exchange, which I mentioned earlier. Many organizations were collecting data on water quality, but this organization, a consortium came together and unified these data sets into a single open data platform to the benefit of all these organizations who were collecting this data independently previously. If I were to summarize the key point in this presentation, it is that NGOs need to sift through the hype of big data and focus on the outcomes that they are seeking. As the implementation barriers are removed and the return on investment begins to be proven through case studies, the future does indeed look bright. Farmers will have instant access to tangible crop recommendations based on their particular plot of land. Tracking the migration paths of refugees will enable NGOs to predict logistical needs of support on the ground, and people will be able to find information about where to locate clean water sources with near real-time data right on their smartphones. The only question is, how long will it take for technology, private public sector partnership, and financial investment to bring about this future? And according to Robert Kirkpatrick, the executive director of the United Nations Global Pulse Program, the data revolution has already happened in the private sector. We have to figure out how we can harness the innovation that's already out there, changing many aspects of society for development and humanitarian action. Thank you very much. And this is our contact information of the project team. If you have any follow-up questions or would like further information, you can certainly contact any of us through our email addresses. Thank you.